going on.
not.
Kind of a funny start to the presentation here. You can tell I'm a developer. This is the title that I came up with. Well, my boss came up with a different title. And it's integrating Sitecore Commerce with hybrids to enable multi-channel commerce, retail, online, and food sales. So what we did is we compromised. We had a third title. And it's that one. Sitecore Experience Commerce 9. And done. So just a little bit about Avanade. We're a global company. We've got delivery centers across the world. We do a lot of Sitecore implementations. We're very proud of what we do. We work very hard. And we are a global platinum implementation partner. Just a brief agenda for tonight. We're going to do an overview of Commerce 9, kind of a brief history of Commerce Server and Commerce 9. Commerce as a Sitecore product used to be Commerce Server from Microsoft. Everyone remember that? So what's new with the new version of Commerce 9? What do you get out of the box? What kind of stuff do you get to play with when you install it? And we'll look at a sample storefront and also go into a brief demo of integrating with an external service. So, what's the big deal about Commerce, and Commerce 9 in particular? Well, 1 in 5 brands has the technology to collect customer data online, and the big problem they have, even when they do collect it, is getting all that data together with their customer data. So it's a huge problem, and it's one that Sitecore is trying to solve. So it's a big problem. We want to make sure that we connect all that information and provide value to the customers and to our businesses. So in short, it's Sitecore's commerce platform, right? It's a pretty simple definition. But the new thing about Commerce 9 is it's now natively integrated. As we'll see in a minute, previous versions of Commerce had varying degrees of connectivity with Sitecore, ranging from not connected at all to partially connected to now fully integrated. Commerce 9 is built for scalability, flexibility. The idea is that you can have multiple servers that have specific roles for them, controlling whether it's the CD server where all the traffic is going, the web traffic is going to, or whether it's your authoring server where just the internal marketers are using it. So built that way from the start, very flexible. And I guess the big thing here is the idea of this sellable item. So it's not just selling products in the store, it's selling warranties, it's selling gift cards, that kind of thing. Everything is a sellable item at the end of the day. So the history of Commerce Server, originally a Microsoft product, standalone product. Through different offshoots from Microsoft, they rolled it out to someone else for outsourcing. That company was acquired by another company. Eventually it became commerceserver.net. And in November of 2013, that's when Sitecore purchased it. From that point on, they did another release of that commerceserver.net platform, and that's what was first integrated with Sitecore, and that was Commerce Server 11. So, as I mentioned, the first version of that Commerce Server 11, not integrated at all with Sitecore 8.2 and below. So, if you look at this slide, we've got the different kind of works. Sorry, it might be hard to read, apologize. The different services that Commerce Server itself offered, so the pricing, the orders, the cart, all that stuff, all done through Commerce Server, none of it done in Sitecore. So and as we advance, when we look at 8.2.1 Sitecore, then we're starting to get some of that, those services integrated with Sitecore, and that's when Sitecore Commerce was really introduced as far as Sitecore goes. But the problem with that, as you can see there, much problems, very hard. There were a lot of integration problems. If you want to do anything, you're resigned to having to access 2 applications to do it. So you do half your things inside of Sitecore, you do half the things in Commerce Server itself. So it's running basically 2 applications just to do simple Commerce Server activities. So now we look at 9.0 plus. Everything is now fully integrated. It's all in the Sitecore Commerce side. Commerce Server as a platform goes away. We don't have to worry about it anymore. So very excited, just as the card shows us there. So what's new? I don't know, I love this slide. It might be too much of a stretch, but this is Tom Jones.
Yeah.
And he has a song, What's New Pussycat, so that's the tie-in there. So Commerce Server, all grown up, right? So now it's fully integrated. It's built on .NET Core 2.0, Azure SQL support. You get the SXA sample site. And the good thing about this is it's a starter kit for you to build upon. So there's other releases, or sorry, Habitat is a sample site that Sitecore released for developing their websites, but that version is not meant to be built upon. It's supposed to be an example, a reference site, if you will. This is an actual starter kit, so install it, start working with it. I have documentation question mark there. Sitecore, maybe not that well known for their documentation abilities. I think they're getting much better with it, but I still think with this, especially with the latest version, not all the documentation is there yet. When you go and try to do some of the latest things, create some minions, do some integrations, you're not going to find a whole lot of stuff out there just yet. But getting better every day. Just a brief look at the architecture. I mentioned it earlier, but you've got your different services that you can have on different servers. In a development environment, you would probably have all these in the same one, but it's an example of how it can be scaled out. Your delivery servers have the Commerce Shop service, your Commerce Server, Sitecore Commerce environment has your minions and your DevOps. DevOps is going to be stuff that only admins are running against. Minions is kind of background tasks, scheduled tasks, if you will. And then with the Commerce Shop service, that's where we have our plugins that plug into it to enhance and to edit stock functionality. So maybe you have an order that has to go through some sort of a workflow, and of course Sitecore didn't know anything about that when they developed Commerce. So you plug into that, you tap into that, and you do your own custom logic in between, and then you send it along its way. So again, plugins, everything is designed from the start to be a plugin. So any of the functionality you want to do in a normal commerce operation, they're all plugins, and they were written that way from the start. So it's not trying to retrofit it back in. So what do we have in the box? High level, Commerce Engine, business tools, the SDK that comes with it, and it's not even a separate download, it's just a part of it, so you can get it right when you download Commerce, and the storefront. These are a lot of the common services you'll see inside of pretty much any commerce application, but it's just a way to show that all those are there. Everything you would normally do with a commerce application, you can do here. And with 9, since everything is now integrated, all these services are right there. So when we talk about the Commerce Engine, it's just like a car, like this sweet ride right here. It's what makes it go, right? So it's the base of it. When you do upgrades, you want to upgrade. When you do customizations, you want to customize it against this engine. And the way it's designed is planning for future upgradability. So you do your plugins here, you attach them. When you go and do an upgrade, it doesn't affect Sitecore. It doesn't overwrite your plugins. Your plugins then get applied to the new version. So theoretically, fewer problems when you do the upgrades. The different roles of the Commerce Engine, you've got authoring shops, minions, DevOps. Briefly talked about those previously, but again, it plays to the scalability aspect of commerce. Commerce 9. The business tools is from within Sitecore there, and it's really for anyone that's the marketing, the customer service, anyone that's inside of Sitecore handling some of those aspects of the customer pipeline, right? So if someone places an order, has a question, you go into Sitecore and you can address everything from within there. Again, it plays to the being in one system instead of multiple systems. And you've got a lot of management features there. And it looks like that, nice and pretty. The SDK, as I mentioned, it gets downloaded with the install for Commerce Server, Sitecore Commerce. And what I'm showing here is that the different samples that they have. So these are all plugins they have. So they have a payments sample. They have a console application, service proxy. These are all examples that they give you out of the box to help you along your way. And again, I think documentation-wise, it's not quite there, and you could use more plugin samples. But that's what they give you out of the box. It's a big help. It's a good thing to compare against when you're doing your own developments. But the biggest thing I like about this is the Postman script collection. Is anyone familiar with Postman? Yes. So it's a way to interact with REST services. But what? Oh, that looks horrible. I'm sorry. It's really good here. They give you basically a pre-baked collection of interactions that you can execute against your Commerce server. So, when I turn it on, how do I get my authentication token? Instead of having to go and write my own REST calls, they're already there in the collection for me. So I just execute it, get it. Bootstrapping the application, just run another call. So everything's there. I mean, there's a couple hundred calls they have built in for you. So anything you'd want to do, you can run against the API out of the box. You don't have to worry about going and writing your own. So the Habitat storefront, again, this is something you have right out of the box. And I mentioned that it's an example site that's up and running automatically after you install Commerce 9. But I also have an asterisk there. There's some assembly required. It's supposed to work right away, but there's some little tweaks you have to do to get it to go. But it's a good way to see very quickly what you get. So I'm going to try to do a demo. I was telling some of the people here my demo environment blew up last night at like 1 a.m. So we're going to make sure we're working here. You're pretty good at that. Ancient piece. All right.
Oh, yeah.
Better?
Yes.
Yeah.
Go, Steve.
Try it.
Solve the problems.
Man. So cool. This is the default storefront. It's even called storefront. Nice, right? It gives you out-of-the-box components like carousels, different product placements, things like that. What we can see here too is it looks pretty stark from the start. If we go into Sitecore, and we'll see if my page timed out. But when we go into the content here, some of the other features of this storefront is. You guys don't like it?
No. I hate your screen resolution. There we go.
There we go.
Perfect.
Wow.
Wow. Read it now.
Did you get this approved before you present? Great. It sounds like it has a big.
I have strong opinions about the screen resolution.
So one of the features is theming. So we can go in and there's pre-baked themes here. So the default one is this storefront mock-up with product images. We can go to storefront branded, save it, go and publish it, and hopefully it'll publish. Cool. And then refresh, and then we've got a new theme that's already there. So obviously great for websites and being able to incorporate your own themes into this. They give you a couple of examples right out of the box. And again, I think it plays to the fact that you don't have to guess about what's the proper format. They give you that full example. So there's something else cool we can look at too while we're here. It gets into the management of these products. So if we look at things like this KickBuds wireless earbuds, they're currently out of stock. We can go look inside the system. This is the business tools that I mentioned. We can go look and see what the stock situation is on those items and adjust it. Now, I say we're going to go in and adjust it. I think in real life, what you would do is you would have an integration with your product management system of some sort, unless it's in Sitecore. If it's in Sitecore, then you would be managing it directly here. But ideally, I think that it would be a separate system that manages those products, and then you're pulling these products into Sitecore, and then viewing it here, but not necessarily managing it. So I don't think it would be advisable to go in here and create new images. Small again. Add new images for each product. It's just not feasible, especially if you have a large product set. So, but this is my KickBuds. I'm going to go change the quantity. I'm going to give them 5. And one thing that's different about this, you see that I'm not publishing it, and that's because it's already pointed at the same database. So now we've got 5 items in stock. So that was a simple, quick tour of the SXA storefront. So the next thing I wanted to talk about was the actual integration that I just mentioned, is the integration into these third-party systems. How is that done? And why would you want to do it? So everything's done through the Commerce Connect API. When do you want to do it? You've got catalog data maintained outside of Sitecore. You've got systems that need to communicate customer data back and forth. Those are good cases for it. And so how do you do that? So you create that plugin, like I mentioned. So everything is a plugin, so you create a new plugin, plugs into the system. In this case, we're going to define a policy, and the policy controls how that plugin interacts with the system. So whether that's specialty variables that are passed along, or how it's able to access things. So you can have that same plugin live on each one of your servers and have it act differently based on the server that it's on. So maybe you don't want it, if you're in the authoring system, to run through all the same checks that you do when it's on the CD, the content delivery system. So you define a different policy for that server. So that's what you do. So adding a pipeline and then getting these minions to do it. So I wanted to go ahead and show you guys that as well. And I'll apologize in advance. This one's probably a little bit more on the nerdy side as I open up Visual Studio, which I'm guessing is also small.
Can you make it smaller?
I probably could make it smaller. So I guess the basic things to show you here. This is the SDK that was provided from Sitecore. So customer.sample.solution. These are the samples I have here. The commerce engine is kind of, like I said, the base of everything. And the way this functions is through these JSON files that get imported. So you define everything in your JSON files for your plugin, and then when the system is bootstrapped, started up and pulls in all its data to know how to operate, it pulls in these JSON files, and that's how it knows to do the things that you're asking it to do. So one of the neat things about this SDK is the way it functions. So it actually operates, you can debug it, run it locally, but in order to do that, what you have to do is go and stop the existing web services and then run it locally. So let me do that real quick. So what I'm doing here, and what I'd like to show you, is this POC that I'm working on for a Hybris import. So the idea is that Sitecore is not the source of all our product data in this instance. And so what we're doing is creating a minion that runs periodically, in which case I can define how often it runs, in my case every 5 minutes. But every 5 minutes, go out to Hybris and pull data back down and sync it with Sitecore. That's the goal here. Now, you'll see that in my plugin that I have, a couple of the highlights that you want to point out, configure Sitecore.cs, and these are standard files provided by Sitecore, and then we go and add the pipeline that we want to do. So I'm telling it that I'm running my Hybris import minion pipeline, and I want to run this block, which is a Hybris block that I've created. So let's see some of the highlights of that. The minion block itself, where this is the run method is what's called when the minion runs itself. And what I want to show you is this policy where I'm passing in variables, grabbing those variables, and then I can do my work against Hybris here with those variables. So if we look quickly at the policies, I'll show you what they look like. This is my policy where I'm defining the policy type. I'm defining the variables that I'm passing in, so service URL, catalog, products and category. And the way I get that into Sitecore is my Commerce minions JSON file. And again, down here, where I'm defining the minion I'm running, and I'm defining the policy set that I'm executing. So, enough talk of that. I'll show you really quickly what it's doing. So I'm just debugging the application so it starts up. Very fast, right? Maybe not. So the concept of what we're going to see here is that the values that I've set in my policy are getting passed in to the minion and being executed. Maybe it's not as fast as it was. This demo's going well, if it doesn't load in a second, we can just skip it. But I'll go and show you Postman while we're here. So this is what I was talking about. Sorry, with all the different API calls you can do, and it's separated by things like the DevOps. So I can want to go in there and bootstrap my instance. I can run an API call that cleans my instance. What I've done here actually is created a separate one for my minion, and I created one where I can execute the minion on demand. So instead of having to wait every time, I can go and execute it directly. So let's go see if this thing is really there. There it is. Okay, so this result here is the API call showing the metadata, showing that it's been loaded. Everything is good. If I go back to Postman here, you know what? Oops. Okay, so I didn't have the custom call that calls my minion. So I can try it really quick, and hopefully this will be of some value to you guys. Well, you know what? I'm not going to show this now. It's kind of pointless for me to do this here. I tell you what, guys. If anyone's interested in seeing this, I'm happy to show it right after. I don't want to bore everybody with this. It's been kind of dragging on here. So let's go back to the presentation, which is almost over anyways. As you can see, the demo was awesome. Did everybody love it? Sorry about that, but I will show you afterwards if anybody's interested in seeing that. It's actually pretty neat. I mean, for the nerds in the room, I think that's the fun part. So in summary, Commerce 9 is no longer dependent on the legacy Commerce product. We can now personalize any aspect of the Commerce system, getting that connection to the customer data. Installation is easier, I say. It uses the Sitecore installation framework, which is kind of known to be a little bit buggy, but it's all scripted now, so it should be, in theory, much faster. The focus on this existing release is B2C, and they've promised that B2B is in the future. So I also have a summary for marketers as well. Have your developers install Commerce 9, deploy the website, have some technical mumbo jumbo, and then profit. All right, thank you. Does anybody have any questions? Sounds good. All right.
You got one, man.
I had more of a
Sure. You mentioned scalability. Do you want to talk a little bit about scalability?
Yeah, so the idea with scalability is that you can have those different roles on the different servers, right? So instead of having everything tied to your CM server, you can separate out each piece of that commerce engine and put it on the different servers, and that enables the scalability. So
I may have missed it, but was there a separate role for PIM itself, or PCM?
what do you mean by that?
I mean, product catalog, right? So if those tend to grow really large, like multiple catalogs and millions of items, what's the choice for scalability there?
Are you talking about a PIM that would be separate from Sitecore, or are you going to put everything inside of Sitecore?
In Commerce, yeah.
Yeah, so that would be the Commerce, Sitecore Commerce engine piece of it. So the CD server has the shops role, the CM server has the authoring role, and then the Commerce engine itself lives on a separate Commerce server, which would control all the PIM stuff.
And how would you replicate that across like global Azure and
Yeah.
global replication?
Just like you would with any other
Multiple
Sitecore
permissions
instance.
and multiple, just like CDs, you can have multiple of these. Cool.
Yeah.
How would you approach extending like the account management that comes with SXA? So you get self-service account management, right? Sign up, all that stuff. And now you want to extend the profile. Would you take a plug-in type approach since the SXA was closed source?
Yeah, I mean everything in Sitecore Commerce is plugin related. So that's how I would approach it as well. So if you want to extend that out, yeah, you put a plugin in. It's just like with pipelines in Sitecore, if you're familiar with that. You put your plugin in between that, and you can have it execute at any point during that process, and then do whatever extended pieces you need, and then yeah.
So that can add like a field to that data model. Now I want to capture customer interest. And if I want to style it, then I guess I go to themes and add a theme up to create that.
If you wanted to style what? Sorry.
Let's say I'm changing the registration form, right? I'm adding 3 new fields, and I need to now restyle it or so. So that's kind of an option. I can't access the direct razor that shipped with it. Because I guess the college would push it.
Yeah, and that's it's a good point about forms as well. The focus on this has not been forms up to this point, from Sitecore. Future versions, they promise full form support, Sitecore form support. So you will get that ability to fully customize exactly how you need it.
So if you get stuck, you may have to roll it around. This is another possibility.
Possibility.
Would you use the plug-in approach, the EPS plug-in approach for, like, let's say, for example, you're integrating with a subscription service that goes to your Commerce product catalog? So, for example, your products are subscription-based, but then went there annually, and then a renewal, and you would integrate that through the pipeline and then bring it back into Sitecore so the user would be able to renew. Is that the process?
Where do your subscriptions go now, I guess? Sorry?
Zuora is the platform we use.
Yeah, I mean, that's the same way I would do it. So you would create a plugin that connects
Which makes perfect sense.
Yeah, create that plugin, go to there, so it just interjects in the pipeline. So you've got that as a sellable item in your product catalog.
Right.
You sell that, interject, go to the third-party service, it returns back its data, and then you can continue on the pipeline.
Okay. That makes sense.
Does it support multiple currencies?
At this time, yes, it does. So that's one of the new features of Commerce 9, is multiple currencies. Sorry about that demo, guys.
I did.
In the interest of Martin's promise to get us all out of here on time, we're just going to dive right into the next presentation. So that is Sitecore engagement. Hey. There we go. Thanks. So my name is Taylor. I'm from Arke. I'm a business analyst. I've done a lot of work with some of the different marketing pieces of strategy that Sitecore provides. So today we're going to be talking about Sitecore engagement values, how we implement them, what we want to do with them, what they're used for. So we're going to start talking about what are engagement values, why they're important, how you use them across your organization, what does it look like to implement engagement value scores, both from the technical as well as the marketing side, and then how do they correlate with business initiatives? Why are these important and why do we want marketing to be interested in them? So while Craig had demos, I have questions for you guys. So you guys have gotten to eat, you've gotten to have a couple drinks, so I'm hoping that you'll answer. So I think that everyone is familiar with these three brands. We've got Disney, McDonald's, and Nike, just in case you guys aren't. I would like to hear from you what actions you think are most valuable for customers to do on these websites. We'll start with Disney and then kind of work our way down. If we had someone that was browsing the Disney website, what would Disney want them to do?
Buy Magic Band.
Hey, that was my first one. Good job. Right out of the box. Anything else?
Thanks, Wally.
Season pass.
Season pass?
Newsletter?
Yep.
Share a tweet.
Yep. Reservations for their different restaurants, participate in their Fast Pass program. So those are some of the things that Disney would think would be valuable as they were going through their strategy. What about McDonald's? by your restaurant. They also have McDelivery for those that didn't know when I was doing research on this. Learn something new every day. Also searching for locations, viewing different menu items, and then what about, last but not least, Nike? Ah, there you go.
Pictures of half-naked athletes. Oh, that much is being made.
So yeah, we've got browsing, we've got actually completing a purchase. They have an account that you can sign up for, so you get a Nike ID, and then you can assign that to any of your further purchases, and it also gets you free 2-day shipping. So those are some of the things that you want to think about when you're looking at different brands, when you're looking at your own brand. What are the things on the site that we want customers to do that are going to drive value for us? It's either going to give us more information about our customers, it's going to give us insight to what's important to them, or it's going to help them execute on things that are important to us. So as we think through that, there's a new company called Amazon, and I don't know if any of you guys have heard of them or interacted with them, but in case you have, start thinking about some of the valuable customer actions that Amazon would want their customers to do as we start talking through some of these other slides. There's no questions yet. So what are engagement values? I've talked about it a little bit, but engagement values are set across a relative scale, so it goes from 0 to 100, and really each step inside the pyramid is relative to the next. So as you're thinking through what are these important valuable actions, how do we want to attribute a value to them, you have to think about those actions in relation to each other. So as we start to move up the scale, we start at a foundation of 0, which is just general browsing, and we have to end at 100, and 100 for this non-Amazon company would be creating an account. Everything in between incrementally increases in value based on how much more valuable the business thinks that is to the previous step in the scale. What's the difference between engagement values and actually leveraging Sitecore goals? They're actually very relatable, and from a marketing perspective, I find that it's helpful to tie the two together when you're talking to marketing about them, because goals are something that's easy to understand, engagement values are a little more abstract. So if you start with goals and then work your way down to engagement values, you get a strategy that makes a little bit more sense. So when you're talking to marketing about how they want to implement their strategy, when it relates to Sitecore, I would start with goals. I would say, what are the important things for your business? What do you want to track on the site? How can Sitecore help you? We can start building out those Sitecore goals, which would trigger as different events happen on the site. So let's say one example would be if you have an application that you would want a customer to download and you advertise that on the site. If someone clicks on something that relates to that advertisement, that's a goal. And then as we continue through the strategy journey and as they continue to mature, then you can bring in engagement values and say, great, now we've got these lists of fleshed out goals. How valuable are these different things to you? What kind of data have you gotten so far? What kind of data do you want to get more of? And which data are you finding to be the most valuable as you're building out your strategy plan this quarter, next year? Why are they important? So we touched on this a little bit already, but it helps drive business initiatives. So as you're thinking through your strategy long term, if you have different engagement values or different valuable things that you're driving towards as a business, that's going to help your Sitecore strategy as well. It's going to help you figure out what goals you're trying to track and help figure out what's going to be important even if it's not important today, so you start to focus those things. It can also encourage alignment across the organization. There's a lot of times where different groups are working in silos. IT's in a silo, marketing's in a silo, PR is in a silo. If advertising's not tied to PR, they're also working on their own thing. So engagement values kind of give an opportunity for everybody to have a seat at the table and talk about what's important to them and how we can leverage business strategy and Sitecore engagement values and goals to go across all different areas of the business. It can also help you identify valuable customers and what attributes they have, because as you start to assign engagement values and customers start to interact with your site and we start to see who these valuable customers are, we're learning about those people. What type of people are valuable to us? And then we can start to market to them a little bit better. The next step in this whole journey is trying to think through, this sounds great, awesome, how do we do it? How do we start to identify these things? So the first thing would be to identify those stakeholders that I kind of alluded to earlier. who's important to us, who needs a seat at that table as we're talking across all of the different business organizations. And you need to organize those business initiatives across that seat of stakeholders. So you want everyone to come to the table with what they're working from as an organization, what are your higher organizational goals, and which of these align with those. So that way when you have all these different opinions, you can kind of coordinate them and get them all on the track for the customer journey. Then you have strategy workshops. These can look a million different ways, but it just kind of talks through, again, what's your overall business strategy, what are you aiming to do, and how can we align all of the things that we've worked through in the organization, the identification piece, and pull it all together. And then you have to ask some good questions. You know, what direction is the business going in? What's our brand messaging? How do we define value? Do we think value comes from actually completing a purchase, or is what's valuable to us right now in the state of the business figuring out more about our customers and figuring out how we align that valuable information and how we build on it going forward? We're getting to the interactive part soon, I promise, guys. So how do I create a goal? In Sitecore's marketing control panel, you can actually go in, there's some out-of-the-box goals that come with Sitecore, but you can create custom goals, and these can get triggered at different points throughout the website. So these can be different interactions your customer has if they log in, they complete a purchase, if they view a particular type of page, if they share something. There's a bunch of different types of goals that can get created. And it's in this same location where we assign engagement values to those goals. They're actually attributes of goals. So like I said, it's kind of easier to have people build out the goal strategy first and then circle back and apply those engagement values second. Okay, so let's give it a try. This is where we're going to get interactive, so get excited, guys. I had mentioned earlier that you guys may have heard about a company called Amazon. How many people have purchased from Amazon before? How many people have purchased more than twice in the last month? 3 times, 4 times, 10 times. And I'm assuming that all of those people who raise their hands means that you guys also have an Amazon Prime account. How many of you are Amazon Prime account holders? So I hope that as we've gone through some of these different examples, you've been thinking about some of those different actions that Amazon customers can take. And the first thing I want to do as we go through this exercise is think about what the customer journey looks like. I joke that we don't know who Amazon is, but clearly based on the raising of hands, we do. But if you were trying to build out your customer journey, you're not as well known as Amazon, what do those different touch points look like? The first thing you want to do is make sure that people are aware of your business. This can come through social media ads, this can come through a TV commercial, this can come from a reference from a friend. Then you want them to consider you. They want you to come to the site, they want you to browse a little bit, maybe do some research. In Amazon's example, maybe you learn more about Prime membership, maybe learn about their Kindle Unlimited program or Audible. Third step is we actually want you to buy something. So this is where they get you in the door, they have you complete a first purchase, it shows up at your door before you could have gotten to the store, and you're like, this is the best. So now we have you retained. We're in the retention phase. You sign up for Prime, you're ordering 3 times a day because you didn't realize you needed something, or you have an add-on item and you can't figure out how to get it in your cart. You subscribe to products, you leave reviews, and then we have you as an advocate. So at that point, they've been making multiple purchases with you for some time. They share their experiences on social media, they tell a friend, they refer people. So as we think about this, and think about the different stages of the customer journey, you have to think about what the evolution of the customer mindset is. And what we really want is a customer that lives in this advocacy space. And that's because they tend to drive the most value. So if you think about that, what kind of attributes do you think build out our most ideal customer in relation to Amazon? This is a non-rhetorical question.
Forgetful, because I can't manage to get everything the first time.
Someone who's busy, impatient.
Yep.
Lazy.
You guys came up with better ones than I did, so I almost want to skip what comes next. But I said consistent, which could be forgetful because they're continually placing orders. A repeat buyer. someone who's an influencer, someone who's an early adopter, someone who may be open to having something like an Amazon Alexa in their house, listening to them, or waking up in the middle of the night with the weird laughter. And someone who drives high value. So as we continue to go through this, now I want to talk about what do you guys think are those specific actions for a customer to take on the website that would drive value for Amazon. And I'm actually going to write some of these down.
Sign up for Prime. Oh, yeah, dash buttons.
One-click buy.
You should just, I do. Yeah, that's how we always have toilet paper and paper towel in my house. You take the last one, you push the button, that's how it works.
Order for Alexa.
That freaks me out. You push it up every time.
Talk to somebody?
She misunderstands me. She
Buy their
doesn't like
newest
me.
high margin products.
Kindle purchase. Then you're gonna buy
Delivery.
$100.
Washington Post subscribers.
Leave a product review.
Okay, I'm running out of space. These are all great answers. So we've got become a Prime member, use the dash button, which I've never actually done. One-click buying, use Alexa to place an order, newest high margin products, grocery delivery, product review. So I think I hit on most of these. Become a subscribing customer, so you can have, it's same as the dash button, only you don't actually press the button. So you may end up with like 6 things of toothpaste before you know it. Become a Prime member, purchase on Amazon Alexa, leave a review, and then have 3+ purchases a month. So now that we've kind of identified some of these important things, I've got a high-level engagement value scale where we can start to kind of rank these things and try and decide where they fall in relation to each other. So I'm going to anchor our engagement value pyramid at 0, where that's just general browsing. The person comes to the website, kind of clicks around, but doesn't really do anything. Based on what we have in this list, where do we think an engagement value of 20 would come into play? Which one of these do we think falls into that bucket?
One-click buying.
It can be more than one or just one. Okay, what about 40? So we've got Prime, dash ordering, placing an order through Alexa, ordering a new high margin product, grocery delivery, or leaving a product review.
Review.
Anything else?
Maybe the high margin product.
There's no wrong answer for this, just so you know. This is all relative to each other, and what I'm trying to show you guys through this example is that each company is going to approach this completely differently. As they start to think about what does a value of 40 mean in relation to a value of 20, that's going to open up a whole bunch of different discussions, and some of these things are going to be hard to flesh out. So there's going to be a lot of back and forth around, well, if this is a 40, then maybe we need to bump up one-click buying to a 30, because I don't think buying a high margin product is twice as valuable as one-click buying. So if we move up to a 60, which items do we think fall into that? We've got Prime, dash order, ordering through Alexa, or grocery delivery.
Place the order.
Alexa and Dash.
No, I think Alexa, I think it will,
We can argue it out, it's okay.
No, I think that Alexa and Dash are towards the top
Yeah.
because they
Yeah.
require a higher level of commitment, and you have to have already been a Prime member to use either of those
Yeah, if you're using
features.
those, you've drunk the Kool-Aid.
I feel like grocery delivery,
That's just like a one-time thing.
yeah, grocery delivery,
It is.
yeah,
Oh, it's Alexa.
yeah.
I feel like groceries should be higher. Because once you get your groceries delivered by Amazon.
You're never going back. You're never going back.
It's the cart, man.
You should only get 100 if you name your firstborn.
Nobody's gonna need it.
I don't know how they're going to track that.
Yeah.
Basically. But it's very
Yeah, that- I
presumptuous
mean,
that we can.
Prime is not-
There you go.
Yeah, Prime is either a 60 or an 80.
I would think that Prime would probably fall right around the 60 range. One, because there's so much saturation right now. If you shop on Amazon and you don't have a Prime account, I don't really know if we could be friends.
Yeah.
Because it's so easy to get it for free, man.
Exactly. So I would agree that Prime probably falls towards the middle. I may have even put it at a 40, just because there's so many people that already have it. But I do think it drives more purchases from a customer, so that you could argue that that would make it more valuable. So we've got dash button and Alexa order.
I feel like dash button is the 80. If we're gonna try to hit everyone, and then Alexa orders 100, because really, you have embraced Amazon.
You drink the Kool-Aid.
Yeah.
I think that's right.
I don't order through Alexa. I just make her turn the ceiling fan on and play music.
Tell jokes.
Occasionally, she'll tell me a really great joke. What?
They can recommend more things for you on Amazon.
Yeah. She randomly responds to the television too.
Sometimes those people are nice. So what I did was take some of those engagement values that we already had in that initial slide and kind of applied what I thought that they would relate to. So we kind of hit it. We had a couple that were a little bit different, but we also had some different attributes or different actions that we added in here. So you can see that while I did this on my own, once we had some different feedback, the scale changed. And that's what's going to happen, and that's why you want to bring those different people to the table. They're going to bring different perspective, and they're going to help, from a strategy perspective, really flesh it out and not have it be a one lens view of the world. So you've done all of this. That's awesome. And what's next? You spent all this time coming up with these goals. You spent all these time arguing about how you want to put all these different things in the scale. What's next? And the answer is you just keep doing the same thing over and over and over and over again. So as you
just
can,
like coding.
Exactly. Just like what Craig was showing us. He opened the door for me perfectly.
Glad I could help.
I appreciate it. So yeah, so what you have to do after this is continue to iterate on it. I think that's one thing that kind of gets left when marketers are talking about all these great things that they want to do with Sitecore, and they want it all to give them the answers that they want right away. This is a growing process. If you got it right away, we would all be billionaires owning Amazon, and we wouldn't be here right now, I don't think. So what you want to make sure that we talk about from a strategy perspective, and it's something that I think also falls into the development landscape, is thinking about how we include these strategy things in both technical and business discussions. Because from a technical perspective, there are certain times when it's not going to be easy to add a goal in Sitecore. It's not something that's just going to be straight out of the box that they can do without any type of development effort. So for developers to understand this is what the business goal is, this is why we're building a certain component, and this is what we want it to do and how we want to track things going forward, I think that's really important. And then from a marketing perspective, understanding that as we continue to get data, as we continue to learn more about our customers, we're going to tweak things, and business is going to change. So there may be a time when we no longer have Alexa, but we just, say to Amazon in the air what we want to order, and that's what it is, or it just already knows. So who knows what's next, but from a marketing and Sitecore perspective, it's more of the same. And that is all I have, so thank you guys. Are there any questions? Yes?
Could you talk about the difference between goals and outcomes, because I get confused a lot.
So it's hard to kind of delineate those two, but from a goal perspective, that's a particular action on the site. Outcomes, I haven't worked with as much, so I can't speak to as directly. But my understanding is that an outcome is more of a desired action. It's not so much of a goal being triggered.
I think outcomes generally have a monetary value associated with them as well. So it's like buying a car or buying something from Amazon or whatever might be an outcome, whereas a goal could be like
Viewing a product detail page.
or signing up for a newsletter or something like that.
Mhm.
A more substantial bigger event that occurs.
Marketing strategy.
I think I saw you over there.
Yes. Eric Lyons with Brightpoint. Some clients, I want to get the quick wins to them. I don't want them to go through the entire process of identifying goals and outcomes and all that. Do you have experience with trying to get a client, getting a client to a quick win versus going through the thorough process and coming up with a more comprehensive implementation?
Yeah, I would say with any of these things, the best approach is to also start small. A lot of companies want to go in and boil the ocean. I would narrow it down to potentially 3 to 5 things that you want to track at the first step. what are your 3 to 5 most important things? You're either getting big.
You had success with that, of that quick win strategy versus more comprehensive review?
Yes and no.
Yes and no?
So we have had some instances where we've implemented those quick win things and we found out that they really did nothing for the business. But we were able to implement them in a fairly quick fashion. The problem that we had with that quick win strategy was it didn't really open the door for further discussion, and it was kind of, once those 5 things were done, the
They
process
moved
was
on.
over.
They moved on.
Yep.
Okay, thank you for that part.
Yeah,
Thank
of
you.
course. Anything else? Awesome. Well, thank you guys.
It is pretty seedy.
Yeah.
Is there a jump ring?
I started this over 2 days ago.
Yeah.
Nobody else has to
Well, I think the big picture is we need to start identifying.
You have a USB mount?
Yeah, RAM was always up in the stratosphere or whatever. Yeah, I hear you. Hey, Bree. I canceled our meeting tomorrow morning. We still need to talk. We're in it all day. It starts at 9 and ends at 8. At the lake. Yeah, we should have time. It's just a good digital summit and everything.
Yeah. Well, this is a quick run through. It shouldn't take that long.
We'll just talk about it. Right?
Oh, he was in a couple weeks ago.
Oh,
They
what?
coupled a day.
Yeah, okay. See you guys tomorrow.
And then he went back and he
I'm gonna get out of here in a minute too.
Great idea.
What meeting is it?
I saw one recycling
Well, there's another guy that never comes
Hey guys, there's actually to-go boxes, so if you want to take something for a significant other or whatever.
Are there pictures of this event?
Sweet.
Do we know? Are there pictures of the event?
Pictures.
That event?
Maybe.
So I'm really hoping to spot our friends.
No spoilers.
They're to be found. Yeah, that was just last week. Yeah, we were. I had some. We went on Sunday, we left our flight like at 10 p.m. 9 a.m. I was talking to them and all these like, you know, how she was like, you got
That wasn't me, but-
No, that was not you, that was people who outright opposed us. You were totally on board with the let's take naps. Notice, I said naps. My partner was really yeah, so they're showers and naps. I did. Oh, yeah, I did.
And then Katie did this, and then Katie said this, and then Katie gave me stickers from my phone. I did, look for it.
He has 3 already. You're 2 over the line. I asked 1.
No, you
You have 2 follow-ups.
No, he asked.
I thought it was a conversation.
Conversation
You
involving
were the
work.
question, it was, it's not.
That's a loophole, man. You know it. What do you say? Or go for it. I like what we're doing, right?
Is it time?
I think it's time.
Give me a second.
I don't think it's on.
Test. Hey, everybody. Let's get one more round of applause for the previous speakers tonight. All right. George and I are fresh off the plane from Berlin, Germany. We just got back from SUGCON last week, and we want to give you guys a recap. George, tell them a little bit about yourself.
Wow, that's a really big picture of me. So I'm Sitecore BB. I work at Perficient. That's where you can Twitter stalk me. And yeah.
All right. And I'm Corey Smith. You can find me on Twitter, Sitecore. I'm also Sitecore MVP. I work for Perficient. I have not had a headshot taken of me with a mustache, so I faked it.
It's amazing.
Yeah, thank you.
It's uncanny, really.
Is it realistic?
Yeah, it's uncanny.
That's where he's trying to get to.
Yeah, that's the target
goal.
state. That's
Right.
the target state, but it's never going to get there. So, anyways.
Work on the crawl.
Yeah. So, we went to SUGCON in Berlin last week. It took place on Monday and Tuesday. And they kicked off SUGCON with a keynote kind of covering, where SUGCON came from. So, just a show of hands, how many people in the room have been to Symposium? Quite fewer than I thought. So if you've been to Symposium, you know that Symposium is really Sitecore's chance to kind of showcase the product. I kind of feel it's more marketing focused. They're really trying to sell the product hard to customers, potential customers, etc. SUGCON's a little bit different than that. SUGCON's not put together by Sitecore, it's actually put together by the community. So they gave a really interesting history of SUGCON. It actually started off from SUGCON Netherlands back in 2014. So it was a user group much like our own. They had, I think, like a cap of 75 people that they could have in their venue, and they hit that cap. And they couldn't have any more people, so people were upset, and they said, hey, why don't we make this a full day thing? So in 2014, they kicked it off with SUGCON Netherlands. Had less than 100 attendees, and it kind of grew. They merged with other user groups in Europe, and in 2016, they finally kind of joined together and made SUGCON Europe, which I was surprised about. I thought that SUGCON Europe had been around for quite a bit longer, but it's actually quite new. And then last year, they did it in Amsterdam, got up to 450 attendees, and then this year, had it in Berlin with over 600, so that was pretty cool. And again, like the big thing with SUGCON, it's not so much marketing focused, it's more about really just having an ATL SUG for 2 days and having community members like us, like Craig, like Taylour come and really talk about the product, how they use it, how it works for them. Yeah, it's all about community, right? So I wanted to take a moment just to remind you guys about like the 3 main ways to kind of get engaged with the community online. Of course, if you're a Sitecore certified developer, there's the Sitecore community forums, which I don't think anybody uses, but that's out there. There's a Sitecore Slack, and if there's one thing that you walk away from tonight, or walk away from this presentation with tonight, is go get on the Sitecore community Slack. I apologize to the people in the back, that's actually really small, I saw some squinting, but it's just sitecorechat.slack.com. It's people talking Sitecore all day long, for better or worse. There's a form you've got to fill out to get on that. I think it asks you like how you're related to the Sitecore community. Just put ATL SUG, put Sitecore A, Sitecore George. Either of those will get you in.
Don't put me down there.
Okay, don't put Sitecore George down. He doesn't want to be responsible for you. And then last but not least is the Sitecore Stack Exchange. The Sitecore Stack Exchange. If you've been doing Sitecore over the past couple of years, you've probably come across it on Google. But it's actually still in beta, so we still need a lot of activity on there. If you've got questions, don't be ashamed to go ask. Even if you're a marketer, developer, it doesn't matter, go ask questions. And of course, if you know answers, please give them as well. One other thing that I wanted to say, last year at SUGCON, if you were at ATL SUG for my recap, Sitecore actually came to SUGCON and made a lot of announcements about the future of the platform. They hinted at Horizon and Zenith, which they announced. Those are like the kind of revamps of the content editor. They announced it at Sitecore Symposium. They announced that at SUGCON actually, and a lot of other features. This year they didn't do that so much, but they did announce one thing, which I'm going to give the floor to George for.
Yeah, so some people will be really happy about this, which is they actually have established a real release cadence, which is kind of cool. So for their software releases, those are kind of the major releases, or kind of like the dot releases. So 9.0, 9.1, 8.2, those kind of major dot releases, those are going to be on a 6-month cadence, once in spring, once in fall, and those are kind of going to be the major software releases. And then all the update releases, the ones that we've grown to know, update 1, update 2, update 3, those are going to be more as patches to the dot releases, and there are only going to be fixes, and something that everyone is excited about is there's no breaking changes in those updates. Hooray!
In theory.
So,
in theory.
Yeah, that's what they tell us. No guarantees. So one of the first sessions that were on stage was by Jason Wilkerson and Richard Seal, talking about commerce and IoT, and so they basically gave this example of kind of a fictional theme park called Sitecore Land, and talked about using kind of IoT. So they were kind of using the Disney Magic Bands as the example of using IoT to kind of track you around the park and be able to take that information about kind of where you use your band and being able to personalize your experiences based off the information gathered by your band, right? And this is probably something that Disney already does really well with your Magic Band, but using Sitecore as a platform to be able to personalize your experience, whether it's during your trip, making recommendations on where you should go or what you should do based on the things that you've done, or after your trip, to further sell you on, hey, maybe you should go on a Disney cruise, or maybe you should do this, or maybe you should do that, based on the things that they've kind of gathered from you based on your physical interaction with the park and the things that you've been doing in the park. So it takes through a kind of big list of technologies, right? So Sitecore Commerce, obviously, so your interactions with your IoT band, your Internet of Things, with Sitecore Commerce to do for kind of commercial transactions. With XDB to store all the information, with XConnect for all the various touch points that gather information about you, with EXM to send emails and whatnot, with marketing automation to kind of gather all that data and then churn out some recommendations. So they basically took all those technologies and smushed them together and kind of did a POC of kind of what it would look like if you were to implement something similar on the Sitecore platform. The conference was 2 days. So on Monday we kind of did the whole opening spiel, and then we broke out into the breakout sessions. So one of the first ones was, so there are three sets of breakout sessions for that day, right? And so you can kind of see a list of each of the breakout sessions for kind of each time slot. So the ones that are highlighted are the ones that we're going to talk about because those are the ones that we went to. I mean, I can make the other ones up.
Let's hear about some of those other ones,
Yeah. So the first one was Uber Modern APIs for Sitecore. This was given by Cam Figge, and this one was really cool. So Cam works for Sitecore now. He's the author of a lot of tools that a lot of us use, but he works for Sitecore now, and he works with JSS on their Team X at Sitecore. And so he took the opportunity to kind of give some of the cool stuff that they were building on that team, including their Uber Modern API, which is based on GraphQL. So for those of you who aren't familiar with GraphQL, it's basically a REST endpoint on steroids, right? So if you've had to deal with REST endpoints previously in the past, you knew that it's not so easy to query, and you have to write custom endpoints if you want to query specific things. If you're saying, hey, I want to get a list of blog posts, for instance, you may have to write something custom to get that list of blog posts and all the comments and and the tags and everything. With GraphQL, it's almost more of a query interface for your REST API. For web services, it's not really a REST API. And so you can send a query, say, these are the things I want. Query it by this way, sort it by this way, these are the fields I want, and it'll return you a normalized set of data based on kind of what you request. So in the blog example, for instance, you can ask it for, hey, I want the blog title, the blog body, all the comments, and for each comment I want just the just the comment and the author, but not the date, right? And so you can basically you have one endpoint, web service endpoint that you can request all this information from, and it'll only give you back what you need. So for those of us who have to deal with a lot of web services, it's sometimes tedious to call services over and over again, make multiple calls, and try to squash all that data together, or have very, very specific single use case web services. And so a lot of the stuff that they're doing with GraphQL for Sitecore will basically enable us to use the Sitecore web services with a query language. The second one was continuous integration using AppBayer with Jeff from Coveo.
You can't say his last name.
I know. Jeff.
Nobody knows how to say it.
I'm not French enough to say it.
Sorry, Jeff.
Sorry, Jeff, if you're watching this. So basically gave this great talk about using AppBayer for continuous integration. AppBayer is this cloud-based service, much like VSTS, but kind of a little bit more dedicated to the Microsoft platform and completely cloud-based, and it's a little kind of more directly related to builds and releases specifically. So he was kind of giving an overview of how to do continuous integration on Sitecore with AppBayer, and it was really cool. So he kind of built a demo and everything, and
I think he did it in like 4 hours.
Yeah, he did it in like 4 hours. He was telling the story of how he needed to do continuous integration, and he looked at all these different platforms, including VSTS, and each one he spent a lot of time on. But with AppBayer, he spent like 4 hours and got it all up and running and working. So it seemed like a really cool platform to do, and it was all cloud hosted and everything. So nothing to install on premises. Marketing automation is on steroids. What do I not remember this one?
It's just marketing automation on steroids. Right. What else is it to say?
Right.
Ishraq talked about that. So
yeah. So
great talk.
Yeah, talking about marketing automation on steroids.
Yeah. Where were you for that one, George?
I was working on my presentation.
Oh, good. Yeah, so kind of going back to the theme of SUGCON being about the Sitecore community. The Sitecore community puts together a hackathon every year. It's usually around March or February. Anybody's open to participate in it. And so they announced the awards for this year's hackathon. So congratulations to all those guys. Yeah, Jeff actually won. Congratulations, Jeff. Yeah.
First one's EPAM.
That was EPAM?
Yeah.
Okay, congratulations,
Mashed
EPAM.
potatoes.
Yeah,
We
mashed
had 3
potatoes.
teams, but the first one is us, yeah.
All right, well, congratulations.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I'll take it.
It's not your team.
They're all my team.
And your comment counts as a question, so. Yeah, that's 5 tonight. I have been counting.
I've been good.
You have been good.
I've been kind.
Yeah, kind. So they also, Sitecore also announced an honorary MVP award. So this was a new thing that we've never seen before. This is basically awarded to Sitecore employees who left on really, really good terms. So they had 3 big name departures recently. Todd Mitchell, Alex Shiba, and Lars Peterson. And yeah, it's kind of a big deal.
End
But,
of an era.
huh?
It's an end of an era. I didn't know that they gave it for that.
Yeah, so camera, Varun just said it's the end of an era. That was not me. Anyways, congratulations to those guys. This award actually has to be awarded by the Sitecore CEO. So again, you're leaving on like super good terms if that guy's gonna approve your honorary MVP. So they followed that up with just giving the regular MVPs, the non-honorary ones, their awards. You can see George over there causing some trouble with Mike Reynolds and some other people. Yeah, that was pretty fun though.
The same shirt.
Is it the same shirt?
Not the same shirt.
I don't know, I think it is.
Might be the same shirt.
Yeah, it's the same shirt.
Are you wearing the same shirt?
No, I'm not wearing the same shirt. Actually, I'm really upset that Eric isn't here tonight because I was wearing my Sitecore Superman shirt. Like I did that for him. Yeah, so Eric.
And you covered it up with your MVP.
And I've covered it up with my award, yeah.
Good move.
I'll let him know.
Yeah, please do. Yeah, and then we wrapped up the evening with a Sitecore community quiz, so this was kind of fun. Before SUGCON, was it just SUGCON attendees that they sent that email to? It was like a type form quiz where they asked a whole bunch of questions about the community and let us basically freeform.
Yeah, it was
And
basically.
was it only attendees or
No,
was
it was everyone.
It was everybody in the community, yeah. So they sent out a type form or some kind of quiz where they basically asked a bunch of questions. So this question here is, what letter of the alphabet should Sitecore's marketing department adopt next, right? So right now they use X for everything, XDB, XConnect, etc. So this is kind of Family Feud style. They had Jason Sancier on this side, kind of representing this side of the room, Sitecore MVP Pete Navarro on that side. We were both on Jason's side, right?
Yeah.
Yeah,
So
spoiler.
Pete, your participation on our side was questionable.
Well, I got this one right. So one of the answers for this one was Q. Yeah, you did try to get me out, that's right. We lost. I don't think that was my fault, but yeah, that was pretty fun, just kind of answering these questions about the community and getting involved, so that was a good time. And that was day 1.
So day 2, everyone had stayed out way too late the night before, because that's what you do on these things. And so everyone totally showed up the next morning for the opening keynote for day 2.
Yeah, big thanks to Bruce from New Zealand for the picture and the explanation of this session.
Right, because we are obviously late. But, I mean, kind of reading through it, it actually was pretty cool. So it was by Todd Mitchell and Lars Peterson.
Honorary MVPs.
Right, honorary MVPs.
Yeah.
Kicked out of Sitecore. So basically, they were kind of showing how connected data works through kind of Sitecore and XConnect and everything. And so you'll see from the screenshot, right, like you basically have like the same component, the same rendering, but personalized a little bit differently, right? And so this was kind of dictated by the user's actions, basically their itinerary data this is a travel agency, right? So taking their itinerary data, their purchase history or whatever, and personalizing based on that. So that's kind of stuff that we're somewhat familiar with. But then there's another whole section where kind of taking all that data, kind of big data style, like mining it for trends, using Power BI to get a better understanding of how that data works and what kind of what kind of information you can basically base out of all this data collected from customers and then personalizing based on that. So, you know, there's a lot of interesting things that they're talking about as far as, you know, just what to do with all that accumulated data, right? You have XDB and XConnect, and you're continuously taking in all this data, but what can you do with it? What should you do with it? You know, how to best leverage that data?
I think another thing they showed off for the marketing geeks is calculated facets. I don't think I'd ever even heard of that before. It's kind of cool. Yeah, so on Tuesday, it was another jam-packed day, full of sessions. I actually was awake for these. The EXM live one was pretty cool. That's Pete Navarra did a live demo of EXM, which was pretty bold, and it worked.
Tempting the demo.
Yeah, he really did tempt the demo gods. Mark Stiles did a presentation on Sitecore Cognitive Services. So Mark is another Sitecore MVP, and he, I think he's done this talk at like Symposium for the past couple of years. Yeah. But basically he's built out this framework that allows you to integrate Sitecore with several machine learning platforms, Azure, IBM, etc. And it's pretty cool. Like if you go to Symposium this year, I highly recommend checking this out and seeing the kind of things you can do with it. It makes it really easy to integrate. Like he demoed automated tagging, so like making new articles in Sitecore, and then you could just click a button in the ribbon and say, hey, tag this for me, and it would actually send it off to Azure Machine Learning and come back with, you know, a list of suggested tags and the confidence based on machine learning. So that was pretty cool. My favorite session was Identity in Sitecore 9 by yours truly.
That's right, it was.
Yeah, by yours truly, and I attended that. Yours gave us a good overview of the new like identity extension points in Sitecore 9. He demoed how to actually build an identity provider and kind of took us through that. But my favorite presentation was the White Hat Hacker's Guide to the Internet. And whenever I started working on this presentation, I didn't want to give anybody too much time, like whenever I was talking about these sessions, but I thought this one was super important. This is actually really interesting. So this guy, he's a security consultant, and basically what he did is he wrote a script, like he went and looked at the Sitecore knowledge base, looked at a list of known vulnerabilities in Sitecore, and he wrote a script that would just go and hit a big block of IP addresses, right? So he's not going and hitting Perficient.com because he knows we're on Sitecore. Oh, Matt says, I lied to you actually. We're not. We're on WordPress. And he just hits this random block of IP addresses with this script, right? And basically it knows how to test these vulnerabilities. And the results were quite surprising. I wrote them down. He crawled 3,500 sites anonymously, again, not knowing if they're, you know, a Sitecore site, if they're a WordPress site, if it's google.com, if it's a server in my grandma's basement. They don't know. And what he found was 44% of those servers that he crawled were okay. They weren't vulnerable to any of those vulnerabilities, which is good. But there was a big hubbub last year about a Taylour vulnerability. Does anybody remember this? Any implementation partners? Okay, so there was a really big vulnerability with the Taylour controls that ship with Sitecore that would allow for remote execution, I believe, which is bad news. And he found that even with all of the fuss that Sitecore made about that through social channels and emailing partners, 52% of the sites were still vulnerable to that vulnerability, which is pretty bad. And again, this is a remote execution problem, right? So this isn't just somebody going and getting into your website and vandalizing it and maybe deleting your content, which you can republish easily, or putting a nasty message on there or something. This gives people like the ability to go and execute botnets. Use your servers for nefarious things, and you don't even know it, right? Your site's up and running normally, but for all you know, God forbid it's being used for child porn trafficking or something like that. You don't know, and that allows them to do that. And the thing to understand that he really drove home is that this isn't like me or some other nefarious guy going out and saying, hey, I'm going to hit your IP address and I'm going to do this. they're doing it just like he is. They're just going and saying, hey, I want to go and take advantage of all these servers. This is a big list of IPs. Go and attack them and install the bot on all of those. So it's very easy for them to take advantage of your servers. If 52% of these still vulnerable, that's kind of crazy. Even worse, that 14% of them still allow you to log into Sitecore through HTTP. So that's really bad because if a content author goes and logs into your Sitecore site over HTTP, it's very easy for people to read their passwords in plain text. So then they get full access to it. And even worse than that, 5% of the sites still let people log in through admin B. 5% of the sites that he crawled still let people log in through admin B, which is pretty crazy. And you could, whenever he was going and giving this presentation, like you could hear a pin drop in the room, right? Like everybody's just sitting there thinking, oh my God, is this my client, right? Like, is this us? Yeah. Like, okay, did I do the Taylour patch, blah, blah, blah. And a lot of people asked him at the end, like, hey, can you share the list of clients? Can you share your scripts? And he said, absolutely not. I've deleted everything. Yeah, and I mean, he had to delete the stuff. It's a risk to him. Like, I think there was a guy in Canada who just got arrested or just got put in jail a couple of weeks ago for doing some harmless like access to some documents that were publicly available. Let them know about it, and they sued him. So yeah, unfortunately he doesn't let us know, but the good news is there's the Sitecore security hardening guidelines. So if you are a Sitecore client, make sure that your implementation partner is going and looking at that tomorrow and getting that implemented against your site. And if you're a partner, make sure that you're always doing that against any site you're getting ready for prod readiness, right? Because I mean, all these things, the thing he drove home is like all these things that he tested against are very easy to prevent. Like if you go through the security hardening guidelines and hit all their points, none of this stuff is going to affect you. Now there might be other stuff out there that we don't know about, but you know, we do the best we can. So a lot of people aren't even looking at that. Yeah, those were some pretty good sessions.
So kind of wrapped up the day 2 with some kind of last minute big sessions. So Mike Reynolds and Cam Roos, they went through forms, the new Sitecore forms, which is really cool if you guys haven't played with the new Sitecore forms module in version 9. So for those of us who know and love web forms for marketers.
Nobody.
All of us. Tattoo of it. They've redone web Sitecore forms, and it's everything that web forms for marketers is not, which is good. So it's brand new. It's only in MVC. There's a lot of drag and drop fun stuff. You know, there's multi-page forms. You know, it's very rebuilt like to how forms should work, and so they made some improvements with it with update 1. I know there's a lot more improvements with Sitecore forms coming down the pipe with the dot release. Definitely there's a lot of investment in that. Greg talked about integrating forms in the future with commerce, so you know this is definitely something that is getting a good amount of investment behind. Then there was a big session about JSS. So JSS, I think, was announced initially at SUGCON last year, right, Corey?
Yeah.
So over the past year or so, so JSS is Sitecore JavaScript services. Basically, it's a framework that Sitecore is building to allow you to build modern JavaScript applications based on the Sitecore platform without, without having to pop up a Visual Studio, write C# or anything. And be able to create kind of modern JavaScript applications on top of Sitecore while keeping personalization and all the functionality of Sitecore. So they just released Preview 3 not too long ago, which has been pretty great. They're adding a lot of functionality. So right now I think it supports React, Angular, and in update 3 they just added Vue.js, which is pretty cool. It's like the new hipster hotness apparently. So they're releasing Preview 4 pretty soon, and they're making some more improvements. So right now, like the whole process of if you can create an application in one of these modern JavaScript frameworks without Sitecore, and then you can import it into Sitecore, and then automatically all these Sitecore items get created with templates and items and renderings and stuff. It's it's all a little magical. But they were using this library called Sitecore Ship for that previously. They've decided it's no good and moved on to something different. So that's a big thing, because I think they were doing something crazy like creating update packages in JavaScript, and I don't know how they do magic like that. But
Did they actually mention an actual release?
Hey, man.
Not sure.
4.
6.
Okay.
That's 6. We got a counter back there.
6.
Yeah.
Right.
But seriously, before you move on.
Generally available with the
All
next
right.
major product release.
Alright, I'll bug you guys later.
So the next
Version 3 is out. I don't think that they said when, or preview 3 is out.
Preview 4 is coming, and then officially.
I don't think they said when,
Not
right?
an official release yet.
The next dot.
Well, I thought that that's like the general availability. I don't think they said when preview 4.
Oh, no. You're asking about GA, right?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So it's going to go GA with 9.1, which is, from our previous slide, going to be in the fall of this year because of the new release cadence.
What about spring?
Alright.
Huh?
What about spring?
Well, they just
Spring is
announced the new
before
cadence.
fall, and spring's right now.
Right.
And spring's almost over.
That's how they spread it out further. They waited
Yeah,
this time to-
probably at Symposium, they'll re-announce the cadences and.
Right. It's going to be winter, summer, because there's
It's the third
not a
time.
season.
Yeah,
That was correct
JSS
suggestion, by the way.
JSS.
Oh, so there was one more cool thing that they talked about, and I forgot to mention it, and it's special to my own heart, which is they basically added this whole thing of being able to create JSS-specific renderings, like in your current application, right? So before it was you're either full C#, traditional Sitecore development, or full JSS, like your whole thing had to be an Angular app, or your whole thing had to be a React app. But now they've basically built in these hooks so you can take your kind of traditional Sitecore app, build a component with Angular or React or whatever, and then use that in your kind of traditional app. So it's kind of cool. That's what the face.
It's a give and take, because it's not on them, it's actually the front end frameworks, right? Angular won't let you control, Angular wants the control of the entire page. React will let you do components.
Yeah, I think they demoed it with React.
Yeah, they
Yeah,
did, right.
When they showed the
React will
Frankenstein
allow you to do
page, right?
Yes.
Yeah, otherwise, at least at a page level, you need to do it all, one or the other. But Angular is, React is a little better.
You can bend Angular to your will.
How many people are using, I know BrainJox has done something with JavaScript services, but has anybody else, or have you guys done another project with JavaScript services since that
Since then, no.
presentation?
Big
EPAM's
time.
doing?
Yeah, big time.
Okay.
Like in
Big?
production?
Yeah,
Like more than one client, or you just have one client that's,
so one client and one internal sort of reference.
oh, cool.
Well, two now, like. Like it's
One page.
So the new Sitecore Symposium site is
They're all
up,
one.
and that's actually written in JSS. So if you want to check out a real live working, public-facing JSS site, the Sitecore Symposium site is the place to go. Looks pretty good. And then to wrap it up, they announced the date and location of the last the next SUGCON.
So if you wanted it to be in Spain or Iceland, as they told us, it's not.
Which was
What a
super disappointing.
Disappointment, yeah.
Because those were like, when we did the whole Family Feud thing the night before, those were like the top 2 vote getters. So they went ahead and disappointed us hard. But anyways, it's in London.
Get your fish and chips.
Right.
Yeah.
But it's April 4th and 5th of next year. So it's, I mean, all in all, it was a really cool experience. You know, I wind up mentally comparing it to how my Symposium. And it's just like, it's a completely different feel because you're with the community and you're with a lot of people who are basically like in Sitecore day in and day out. And like, all they want to do is kind of share with you like what they know and what they've learned and, you know, bounce ideas off of you. Like, you know, even though, you know, we stayed up way too late, right? A lot of those conversations wound up being about Sitecore and, hey, you know, I was doing this and there's, you know, what do you think about this? I know you've played with this before. And so it was a great opportunity for some ad hoc conversations that you may never have especially with people all around the world. So it was a really cool experience in that respect, and getting to meet a lot of people who are involved in the Sitecore community just basically everywhere. So with that, That kind of ends it. We brought souvenirs. They're posters.
Oh, yeah. Get those out. Anybody want a poster? These are pretty cool.
Craig does.
From SUGCON. Greg does.
I'll put them on the table over here. You guys can kill each other.
Okay.
Hey, did they
No,
talk-
seriously, we've got a ton.
Did they talk- So you said Cam's on the next team. Did they talk about like how they determine what they're going to work on? Is it just kind of like they brainstorm about some random new cool shit and just do it?
That's what we like to think, but I think they're just all focused on JSS right
Yeah, they're all focused.
Okay.
Yeah.
Basically those stories, right? React, Angular, Vue. So React and Vue really.
Well, it's not just those, right? Like, it's I think originally on the roadmap, it was just React and then Angular, and then Vue kind of
Not
came
even
up.
Angular.
Oh,
Not even Angular.
yeah,
Just
you
React.
came up overnight, and they're like, oh, okay, we need to do Vue.
Yeah, they've definitely talked a lot about like being able to use JSS is not just like they've been able to find uses for JSS outside of JavaScript, which is kind of cool. So like basically, it's their headless solution. Effectively, is what it's becoming, right? So instead of headless with just JavaScript, theoretically you could have a PHP front end on JavaScript.
Don't do it.
Top of Sitecore, right? And then
Don't do it.
Well, we run on WordPress anyway, so we know PHP.
Yeah.
Or ASP.NET Core, or some other front end, so you're a little bit more decoupled, and so kind of the technology that they're developing is actually really cool for stuff like that. And so, while it started with React, I think it's growing bigger and even beyond JavaScript. But I don't know anything. I just hear things. We'll take that with a grain of salt.
Who do you think is going to lead that team now that Alex is
I think it's
Westman.
Nick.
Westman.
Yeah, it's either Nick or Adam.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's Nick.
Okay.
Basically Nick. But we have a couple of members, or at least one I know, part of X. So I just hope they were out here sooner. And did anybody mention anything about Cortex?
What is that, 7, 8? How many?
That's 7.
We got 7 questions.
I thought
for
we
you.
had time when we were done.
Well, you still got a limit.
I'm just getting the comment, I'm like, just don't want it to kind of die
Make the
down.
conversation go, I see.
Yeah, I see the loophole. Any other questions other than Varun? Yes, sir.
Did you say anything about the Marketing Cloud partnership with Salesforce? It was announced at Dreamforce, and then I didn't hear anything, and customers asked me about it.
At least in the sessions I went to, I didn't hear Salesforce
No,
mentioned once.
I think they'll talk a lot more about it at Symposium.
Yeah.
Right, like, the field was very more towards a technical audience than a marketing audience. So I think if anyone talked about Salesforce, people would riot something.
Any more?
If I recall, it looks like one of those breakout sessions was specific for Salesforce integration. So I don't know if there's.
Yeah, you're right. I think it was Himadri and Suresh from Nishtec. I think that they made some kind of framework to integrate with ERPs.
There's one.
Oh, no, that was for Sitecore Commerce. I don't think that was for Salesforce. Yeah, there we go. Sitecore and Salesforce DMP integration.
Are those presentations available?
They will be.
They will be, yep.
Yep, every single one of them.
So yeah, they do a really good job of like recording everything and getting decks and everything, so.
Yeah, actually,
It's coming soon.
Brian Beckham from RangeOx, he presented at SUGCON last year. He's got a pretty good presentation that you can go and see on YouTube from last year's SUGCON and a bunch of other ones. So, yeah, they're pretty good about that. I don't think they do it for Symposium, do they?
No.
They want you to pay.
There's too much like legal stuff going on. We don't care.
Is that it? All right, cool. Thanks, guys.
Thanks, everybody.
Hi guys, thanks for coming out tonight. Thanks again to the presenters. Like I said before, there is some leftover food if you want to take something home. Don't forget your parking ticket, and we'll send you some updates on the next event. Thank you.
Oh, that's Robert. The one you're talking about was Pete's. That was the one, but he never actually printed it. We tried to get him to print it.
I was like, that red one looks.
Oh no, it wasn't Armageddon, it was Stranger Things.
Yeah.
That's what he based it on, yeah.
So, has Steve talked to you about
The skies and everything.
Notice